Welcome to week 5 of a series we've been in called Breaking Up a Fight. I want to say hello to those of you joining us via video at one of our West Texas campuses or watching on TV or at church online. We're glad that you're joining us for this series as well. If you hadn't been here, if you're first-time guest or you're just starting this series with us, we've been talking about how most of us are really good at getting into fights, but we're not as good at breaking them up. We're going to get into fights with our spouse or a family member or a friend, like verbal disputes, but we're not as good at breaking them up. And so we've been talking about, in this series, how to break up fights in our own lives and lives of people we know and love as well. Now, if you were here last weekend, it was pretty awesome because Clayton, our Southwest campus pastor, was a good sport. And he came up here on this stage and a legit MMA fighter came up here and demonstrated some fight moves, some submission moves on Clayton. I got a report. Clayton didn't end up in the hospital. He's doing good. He didn't break an arm or a leg or anything. He is doing just fine. But here's the problem. Mark and Brandon, y'all know Mark and Brandon? Brandon's our Southwest worship leader. Mark's our downtown worship leader. They felt left out last weekend. They were disappointed. I invited Clayton up here to get the moves demonstrated on him rather than them. So this past week, they just took matters into their own hands. And they showed up at a gym where there are some MMA fighters. And they wanted somebody to demonstrate some of the fight moves on them. So you're not going to believe this, but you may laugh a little. Take a look.
Action.
Could you? Sorry. Maybe I should hold it. Hold it right there.
Yep.
What's up, Eli? Brandon and Mark here. And we thought since we're in the middle of a Breaking Up a Fight series, it would be fun to come actually get in a fight.
So we're here at Premier Marital Arts to do just that. Do just that.
Did you say marital?
Yes.
What would marital arts even be?
I don't know, maybe we get together and make clay pottery or something as a couple. I'm really excited to do that. Cool.
They're going to take you down.
You down.
They're going to take you down. What's your name?
James.
James, were you born this tall?
Yes.
What do you do here?
I beat people up.
What makes you think you're qualified to be an instructor here?
I'm a second-degree black belt, and I compete in MMA.
It's not so great. And now, these dudes are going to show us some sweet moves. Oh.
All right, now we can work on some jiu-jitsu, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I'm not scared of you.
Oh, yes. Use your safe word.
All right, guys, basic self-defense. If someone's coming at you, one of the most likely ones is usually like a two-handed choke. I'm not bringing my arm through. I'm actually using my shoulder to block his grip. And then from there, I can come back with an elbow, turn him underneath, bring him to the ground, and finish him off from there, okay?
What if he has a knife? What do you do?
If he has a knife, well, there's a couple of different things you could do. Can I borrow your knife? Okay. If he goes from an upper, like a stabbing motion, like psycho, here, you can bring it back through and step back.
What if he has a gun?
Okay. I want to have my hands up and kind of a passive, oh, hey. Then what I want to do is bring my hands in and up as fast as possible, grabbing the slide. By grabbing the slide, he's only going to have one shot, and I'm aiming that shot right at his face.
Yeah.
Then from there, I'm going to take the hammer of the gun, drive it into his chest a couple times, pull down. Remember, I reload the gun and keep it on my attacker.
That might be the most awesome thing I've ever seen. So, what happens if they have a knife and a gun?
Together?
Yep.
Who would you be hanging out with that would carry a knife and a gun?
Like a ninja or something?
Yeah, ninjas. What if they have three knives and 2 guns?
Run.
You're in trouble, right?
3 guns.
You're in trouble.
So why do you even need to do karate
Actually, you probably do.
if everyone just carries a gun around?
That's a good point.
It's like the dumbest sport ever invented.
Oh, God. E-life kick.
All right, you want to try to nail the power line symbol right there, like right in the middle of the bag, okay? Yeah, just like that. If you can. All right, so on a two-handed shirt grab, remember you want to control their hands. Mm-hmm. I want to keep a nice tight grip on them.
That sounds like a good idea. Then, yeah. What if I were to like try to?
This has been Mark and Brandon, and that's how you break up a fight.
Word.
Word to your mother.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
How are feelings, bro?
And those are some of your worship leaders, Experience Live, men of many talents. When they pulled out 3 knives and 2 guns, I was watching this at home, I almost died laughing, seriously. I thought, this is not happening. This is hilarious. Now for this series, our instructor is not James from the video, not an MMA instructor. Our instructor in this series in Breaking Up a Fight is a guy by the name of James. He's the half-brother of Jesus. And he wrote a letter to some people in his church because he was trying to break up a fight that was happening in his church. It wasn't a fist fight, it wasn't an MMA fight, it was a church fight. And basically there were some guys in the church that wanted to be teachers in the church. They thought they were all wise and had all the gifts you needed to be a teacher. So they try to oust the guys that are teachers and they try to basically take over the church. So James is writing to his church who had scattered out from Jerusalem because of persecution. He's writing to them, trying to break up this fight that they've gotten into. So we've been walking verse by verse, the latter part of James 3 and some in James 4, learning how James tries to break up this fight and saying that we can learn from him how to break up fights in our own lives, in our marriages, or among family members, or with friends or coworkers. We can learn a lot from James, so we're continuing in James 4 today. If you got a Bible, let's go. James 4, beginning in verse 4, page 292, if you're in the eLife New Testaments. And if you don't have an easy-to-understand translation of the Bible, we'd love to give you the second part. It's called the New Testament for free. On your way out, it looks like this, page 292. James 4, instead of telling you what we've talked about over the last 4 weeks, kind of like coming in the middle of a movie, I'm just going to tell you that you can go to our website, experiencelifenow.com. You can watch some of the videos there and catch up. If any of this is confusing to you or you think you missed something, you can check out the messages you missed online. Let's keep going today. James chapter 4, verse 4. James, trying to break up a fight in his church, he says this, 4 verse 4 to his church, you adulterers. Now, if you're in his church, because remember, this is a letter he's writing to him, and you're reading this letter, you're going, why did he call me an adulterer? Like he's been getting on to us because we've been fighting. We understand that. Why is he bringing adultery into this? We're not committing adultery. You commit adultery? No, not commit. You commit adultery? No, we're not. Why is he calling us adulterers? We're not even talking about sex. We've been talking about fighting, not sleeping with somebody who's not your spouse, okay? Why is he calling us adulterers? He was upset. This is one of the strongest rebukes in the New Testament. It's very important. We'll come back to it. He keeps going. Writing to his church. Hey, don't you realize, church, those of you fighting in my church, listen to this. Listen, church, here's what he's saying. Don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? Don't you realize that? Now, some of you are like, friendship with the world. They would have understood what this meant. You just replace the world with sin, we'll understand too. Don't you realize that friendship with sin, James is saying to his church, makes you an enemy of God? And they're going, oh yeah, we understand that. Because they used to be friends with sin. They used to be friends of sin. They lived in sin, and they knew that as a friend of sin, they were an enemy of God. They knew that, but then they committed their life to Christ. They were no longer enemies of God's. They were a friend of God, friends with God. They were friends with the world. They defriended the world, and they became friends with God. He's saying, don't you realize, though, that because of your fighting, and it's kind of a broad rebuke for the things he's been writing to him in this letter, don't you realize you're seeming like a friend of the world, though, by fighting? Don't you realize that? Like, church, are you wanting to go back to being an enemy of God again? They go, no. He's going, you're acting like it. because you're not a friend of the world anymore. You defriended sin. Doesn't mean you don't still struggle some with sin, but you definitely don't consider it your friend. You're not living in it. It's seeming like because you're fighting, you're persisting in these fights and these number of other things you're doing. It seems like you're still friends with the world, but you're not, right? You defriended sin. You're no longer an enemy of God. You're a friend of God. Why are you acting like a friend of sin? By fighting. Why are you acting like a friend of the world? He's like, you don't want to go back there, do you? No, we don't want to go back there. He said, quit acting like it. He keeps going. This is strong. He said, I'm going to say it again. That's how you know this is important. He's going to say it again. He's like, listen, just process this, because this is a word from God to us as well. If you want to be a friend of the world, James is saying to them, you make yourself an enemy of God. You want to go back there? No, we don't want to go back. He said, you're acting like it. You're acting like you want to go back there. Don't you realize friends of the world are enemies of God? You're no longer a friend of the world. You've defriended the world. Now you're a friend of God. You should act like it. It's seeming like you still want to be friends with the world. Ooh, that's strong. He keeps going. He said, what do you think the scriptures mean? Like, what do you think the Bible means when they say that the Spirit God has placed within us is filled with envy? What do you think that means? They understood what it meant. That God was envious in a good way of their devotion. They had become friends with God. He wanted them to be just friends of His, and He didn't want to share their devotion with the world. He wanted them to be part friend of God, part friend of the world. He's saying, hey, I'm envious of your devotion. I want you to be fully devoted to me. And it's like James is saying to his church, hey, God feels like you're betraying Him. By the way you're acting, it seems like your devotion is kind of divided. He feels like you're betraying Him. He kind of feels like maybe you're cheating on Him with other gods. Which is perhaps why James said, you adulterers. He's saying, you want to know how God feels when you fight? You want to know how God feels when you rebel against Him, when you sin? I'll tell you, the same way you'd feel if your spouse told you they were cheating on you. That's how He feels. It's really that bad. I thought He's just cool with God. I thought He's God, no big deal. He's forgiven. He's going, no, it's like spiritual adultery to God. When you get in a fight, I'm not talking about a disagreement. Remember, a fight is a disagreement that leads to unkindness. When you get in a fight, He's saying, let me just tell you how God feels about it. It feels like you're cheating on Him like with other gods. Like the same way you'd feel if your spouse told you they were cheating on you. They're going, oh man, I didn't even realize it was that bad. I didn't realize that. And perhaps He's saying this so strongly so that in the future, when they're tempted to fight, they'll stop and go, not only do I not want to hurt that person I'm fixing to fight with, I don't want God to feel like I'm cheating on Him. Like, what has He done to deserve that? He's been so good to me. I don't feel like that. So He's thinking, hey, if they really understand how their sin affects Him, maybe next time when they're tempted to sin, they'll resist the temptation rather than fall into it. Experience life. Did you know that in the fight you're in now, or the fight you've been in, as a follower of Jesus, that it feels to God by being in a fight or by sinning against Him in some way, that it feels to Him like adultery? Did you know that? Like spiritual adultery. Like it feels to Him what it would feel like to you if your spouse told you that they were cheating on you. Now this is tough, and this is really a horrifying thought, but James wants us to go there, so let's go there. If you're single at all of our campuses, I just want you to imagine being married. If you're married, for some of you, this isn't going to be hard to imagine because this has happened to you. But James is saying, let's go there, so let's do it. I want you to imagine being married, and maybe later on today, your spouse comes home, and they confess to you they have been cheating on you. I know it's hard to think about this, but James is saying, listen, it's good to think about. We need to think about this so we know how God feels. So just get it in your mind. You got it? How do you feel? Your spouse just told you they're cheating on you. How do you feel? Devastated? Broken? Like you want to punch a hole in a wall? Like just furious? Like you want to vomit? How do you feel? Now some of you, I get it, I hadn't really thought about this. So it's a real struggle to even know how to imagine it. So let me help you. I have somebody I'm close to that was married for over 15 years. She loved her husband, and she thought her husband loved her. They've been married for 15 years, and it always planned for the next 50 to be faithful to each other. She wanted to be faithful to him, and she was thinking he wanted to be faithful to her. Well, after this 15-year mark, for some reason, she said, he started to tell her that he just needed to stay late at work, and so he wouldn't come home till really late in the evening. It was like consistently, like almost every night, and she trusted her husband. I mean, because it's her husband, you trust your spouse, right? Yeah, he's got to work extra at night. He's got things on a lot on his plate. He's got to work. So she didn't really understand why, but she trusted her husband. Well, one day she picks up the mail and gets a cell phone bill. Usually she throws it away because it just automatically hits her account online, doesn't need to look at it, just trashes it because it just tells you kind of what happened that month. But this day, for some reason, she just decided to open the envelope and look at the cell phone bill. And she started to see that in the evening, each evening, her husband's number had been calling this other number that she didn't recognize over and over again. Sometimes they just talk a couple times that evening. Sometimes it'd be long conversations, but he's calling. He's saying he's working, but he's like on the phone. He's, a couple of times each evening and sometimes for an extended period of time with another person whose number she doesn't recognize. So like any of us would be, she was a little suspicious, just going, I thought he was working. He told me he's working. He's not. No, he's not doing that. No, surely not. No. We're going to be faithful to each other. But she thinks, man, I need to look into this a little more. So the next evening when he said, hey, hey, came home for dinner, got to be gone for the evening, got work to do, she just decides to hop in her car and follow him, thinking that he's going to lead her to work. He doesn't know she's following him. He leads her to this place where she gets out, where she's still in her car, but where he gets out of the car and meets up with another woman, grabs her hand, they embrace, and they walk into this place. And so you can imagine being her, you're kind of down this street, you're watching this happen. What's she doing in her car as she had followed her husband to this place? Bawling her eyes out. She can't believe it. No way. Who's that woman? What's he doing here with her? What's going on? I thought we can be faithful to each other. And so he gets home later that evening, and she confronts him and says, hey, I followed you, and I saw who you met up with. What's going on? He confesses to her that he had been having an affair for some time. She felt totally broken, devastated, and horrified. But it was her marriage. She wasn't just going to let it fall apart like that. She was going to fight for her marriage in a good way. So she says, hey, I forgive you, and go to a counselor. We're going to work this out. And they go to a counselor, but over the next couple of weeks, she gets some phone calls from some friends who tell her that they saw her husband with that lady around town in the evenings. Turns out he just continued to cheat on her even after she forgave him a second time and a third time. He just kept abusing her in this way. I mean, you kind of getting how she's feeling? In time, you can imagine this led to divorce. And the reason they got divorced, she was trying to make it work. The reason they got divorced is her husband chose to be a friend of sin rather than a friend of hers. A friend of this world, doing things like the people in the world do them, rather than being a friend of hers and being committed to her. And she was devastated, felt cheated, heart totally broken. You got this in your mind now? You imagining this now? James is trying to take you there. You imagining this now? Hope you are, because James is saying, that's good. Now you know how God feels when we fight or when we rebel against him. Now you got that awful feeling in your gut. You sick to your stomach. He's like, good. Now you know how God feels when we cheat on him by rebelling against him or fighting. You need to understand how God feels, because James recognizes if we understand how God feels, the next time we're tempted, we'll resist it rather than embrace it, because we don't want our God, who loves us so much and we love him so much, to feel that way. It's as if James is asking him and asking us as well, because we get into fights too. It's as if he's saying, hey, why would you cheat on God? If he really feels that way, if he's not just making this up, but God really feels that way when we rebel against him, he's saying, why would you do that? And here's what we have to remember. We have to remember who we're cheating on, who we're committing spiritual adultery against. A picture helps. We just have to remember who it is we're choosing to fight against and cheat on. And he's been nothing but good to you and to me. This is proof. I mean, they almost beat him to a pulp. Scars, wounds all over his body. Stick a crown of thorns on his head, pierces his head, and blood spilling out everywhere. His hands are nailed to a piece of wood, his feet nailed into a piece of wood. And he's doing that because he loves us. And he wants us to spend eternity with him. And he wants to be able to forgive our sins. And he wants us to have a right standing with God. And he knows that we couldn't have it unless he did this, died in our place to take our fine and our punishment for our sin. And James is going, I bet he would love to show his church a picture of Jesus if he could on a cross, saying, so you want to cheat on him? What'd he ever do to you? Why would you cheat on him? He gives us good gifts. The Bible says he blesses us with every spiritual blessing, and he takes us back each time we cheat. James is going, you going to keep doing this? We going to keep going there? He's like, if you recognize that by sinning against God or fighting, which is what he's talking about here, if you recognize it makes God feel like you're cheating on him, why would you do that? If it's really not just, no big deal, I sinned, but Jesus died for it, I'm good, it's good, it's just sin, it's just sin. James is going, no, it's not. You know how bad this hurts him? It's a big deal, he says to his church, you adulterers. It's a big deal. That's how it feels. So why not next time when you're tempted to fight or to sin in some way, you just think to yourself, hey, not only do I want to hurt this person, because that's what's going to happen, but do I want to hurt my God? Because that's going to happen too. Is that what I want to do? No, I don't want to do it. And maybe he's thinking if we really understand how bad this is, how bad it makes him feel, and how much we're going to hurt that other person, maybe when we're tempted, by the grace of God, we'll resist the temptation rather than fall into it. We'll not get into the fight rather than say what we really want to say that's going to launch us into a fight. He's saying, remember this to us, experienced life. Remember this. When we choose to rebel, when I choose to rebel, when you choose to rebel, it's not just, hey, no big deal. God's cool. I mean, he's, yeah, your sins are forgiven, no doubt about it. But he's saying it feels like spiritual adultery to him. He accepts you back when you cheat, but he feels kind of like you'd feel if your spouse told you they were cheating on you. It's like James is saying, let's not go there anymore. Church, okay? Can we break this fight up, he's saying? Can we break up the church fight and just not go there anymore? Because James is going, I don't know about you. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to hurt him. James said again to them, don't you realize that friendship with the world, friendship with sin is hatred toward God, makes you an enemy of God? They're going, yeah, we know. He said, well, then quit acting like a friend of the world. Stop fighting. Break up the fight. Break up the fight because you're seeming like you're devoted to the world or to sin rather than to the God who loves you and sent his son to give his life for you. So church, you want to fight with somebody now? Your spouse, a friend, coworker? You tempted to get into a fight? You will be. Why don't you break it up? Why don't you not get in to begin with, remembering I'm going to hurt them, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt the person I'm fighting with. And I'm not only picking a fight with them, I'm going to hurt the God who loves me. He's going to feel like I'm cheating on him with another God. I'm choosing friendship with the world over friendship with him. Friendship with sin over friendship with him. I'm not going there. When the temptation comes to fight, I'm not going there. I'm not going to do that to him. James is wanting us to feel it. Remember, think about what it would feel like for your spouse to tell you they cheated on you. And remember that your God's going to feel that way if you step into this fight. So don't go. Don't go. Now, some of you at all of our campuses, you're not just acting like a friend of the world. You are one. The Bible makes it clear that then you're an enemy of God. And we've all been an enemy of God before. This is what the Bible says. You didn't realize this maybe, but this is Paul, Romans 5:10. He said, for since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his son, while we were still his enemies, before you commit your life to Christ, before I commit my life to Christ, you're an enemy of God. You know that, right? I mean, it's not surprising because you feel like you're in a fight with God. You're rebelling against him. You're breaking his law, and you describe it as you don't feel right with him. Yeah, because you're in a fight. You feel like you're at war with God. So you get this. He's an enemy of sin. You're living in it. You're friends with it. But what Paul is saying here is that you can defriend sin, defriend the world and become a friend of God. How? By trusting in Jesus. He finishes out. We will certainly be saved. How? Through the life of his Son. Saved from what, you say? There's a lot of talk about being saved in the New Testament. We're talking about saved from what? From what Jesus calls hell. What the Bible refers to as eternal punishment or eternal destruction. We need to be saved from that. That's what you get. That's what I get. That's what we deserve because of our sin. But Jesus comes and offers to save us and rescue us from that. You see, God's a good judge. He has a law too. We break his law, we're criminals in his sight. We get what we deserve one day, it's called hell. He has a prison and it's called hell. Just like a good judge has a prison. And Jesus comes to rescue us from this because he doesn't want us to experience that. And what's great is when we repent. It's called committing your life to Christ. We call it that. When you repent, turn from your sin, forsake your sin with the desire to walk in obedience to Jesus, and you ask Jesus to save you from what you deserve, he does. He will. He forgives you of all of your sin, gives you right standing with God, and then get this, brings you into friendship with God to where you're no longer an enemy of God. Now you're a friend of God. Doesn't mean you don't still struggle with sin and sometimes seem like a friend of the world like they were, but you're not a friend of the world. Used to be, you're not anymore. Now you're a friend of God, and you're wanting to not share your devotion with the world or anybody else, but you want it fully to be given to the God who deserves it, who deserves our hearts, us loving him with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Make sure today at all of our campuses that if you walked into this room an enemy of God, that you don't walk out an enemy of God, but that you commit your life to Christ and you become a friend of God. You need him. You can't save yourself. You can't be good enough for heaven. The standard is moral perfection. You need a Savior, or you're going to head to God's prison, and trust me, you don't want to go there. That's where I was heading. Jesus saved me from it. I'm forever grateful. I've committed the rest of my life to telling everybody that I can the good news that Jesus can save us from the penalty that we rightly deserve because of our sin. He can save you too today if you trust him. Make sure you trust him. Make sure you ask him today, and he'll bring you into friendship with God. You're not a friend of the world if you've committed your life to Jesus. James is saying, quit acting like it. Quit fighting and acting like it. Break up the fight. Realize what it does to your God, and don't get into a fight again. Resist the temptation. Now, you're going to want to be back next weekend. You know why? James is going to tell these guys how to get the devil to run away from them. Like the devil who's tempting them to fight, he's going to tell them next week. It's James 4, how to get the devil to run away. You're not going to want to miss what James says. And make sure you come back with a friend. Let me pray for you as we close. God, I realize that today is heavy. It's heavy because this text is heavy. He's calling him a strong word. And God, I know that James could call me that because of the fights I've been in. He could call my friends here at this church that we've committed spiritual adultery on God by sinning against him and rebelling against him. And God, I think my friends are probably like me. When we look at that picture, we're just saying to you, God, we don't want to do that anymore. By the grace that you've offered us, we want to resist the temptation to fight, the temptation to rebel, the temptation to sin against you. We want to get better at resisting that so that you don't feel the way we would feel if our spouse told us they were cheating on us. God, we don't want you to feel that way. We love you. You've been nothing but good to us. So God, this week as we're tempted to fight, I just pray we would remember, one, we don't want to hurt the person we're going to fight with, but two, we don't want to hurt our God. And that's what we're doing when we're fighting. So God, help us, like James is saying, to break it up. To break it up. We can't do it on our own. It's by the grace you give us. We'll see that next week. By the grace you give us. God, help us to break it up. God, there's fighting going on right now in our church. I know that. Husbands and wives upset with each other. Parents and children. Friends, there's fights going on. God, I pray they be broken up today with the grace and strength that God gives. And God, I pray that we would resist the temptation to fight in the future because we'd remember the cross, what Jesus has done for us. And we think to ourselves, I'm not going to commit spiritual adultery on him. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I know how awful that would feel. I'm not going to put him through it. God, help us. We want to follow you. In Jesus' name. Thanks for checking out one of our messages today. For more information about our church or to watch other messages, you can go to our website at experiencelifenow.com. Let us know if we can serve you in any way, and we hope to see you real soon.